At the end of the 2006-2007 school year, the Detroit Public School System closed 65 underperforming schools for various reasons. The majority reason being a desire to condense operations into fewer buildings due to a decline in student enrollment. The schools left behind, however, left a bad taste in many people's mouths, according to a recent Detroit News, Detroit Free Press article. Not only were these abandoned schools not secured properly, but they were not cleaned out properly. Textbooks barely a year old left behind. Halfway updated computers left behind. But most damning of all were student records, grades, social security numbers, parental contacts, emergency contacts. Something that someone could come in, steal, and ruin a person's reputation or their credit. And these were not secured or removed from these schools. These schools were not boarded up. And in Detroit, when word gets around of an abandoned building, the vagrants, the homeless, the ones on a thrill are going to go in and mess up those buildings, take anything of value, and use it to better themselves and worsen those that might be in different buildings. Downtown Dearborn, they're going to be tearing down the old Montgomery Ward building on the corner of Michigan and Schaefer later this year. Now, Montgomery Ward was in business in that location for 70 years. When they closed in 2001, they had a fire sale to get rid of all their merchandise. Once they did that, they sold off all their fixtures. Once all that was done, the offices moved out. But when the offices moved out, they left nothing behind. All the paperwork was properly disposed of, either by shredding or giving it to another corporation that would keep those records secure. When they go in May to remove the asbestos and prepare the building for demolition, you might find some shelves, you might find coat racks, you might find the old newspaper stuck behind a wall, it's 50 years old. But no confidential information should be in that building, because when the store liquidated, they made sure all pertaining evidence to social security numbers, accounts, everything else, receipts, were gone. To where if someone had to break into that building, they could not get their hands on that vital information that might determine a person's credit rating or a person's basic goodwill in life. Now, the Detroit Public Schools are not a corporation, and they've told us a million times that they're not. They're out for the children. They're not a business. But yet this same thing also applies to them. You have different schools from around the city that have been complaining of a shortage of textbooks and quality teaching materials, while the students are failing with a 74% dropout rate, where there's question whether half the teachers are even certified to teach in any district, let alone Detroit's. Their cases could be helped with some decent textbooks. And there's schools located within 5 miles of these shuttered schools, textbooks, a gold mine of textbooks, within 5 miles of a school that's being left out in the elements for somebody to abuse, not to use. Everyone's complaining about technology. Look at how much computers cost these days. It's almost impossible for a school district to afford completely new computers. Though computers date, they're still good for a few years. They've got a few years shelf life. In one of these buildings, I believe it was Joy Elementary, was riddled with computer parts that were no more than 2 years old. Software updates, maybe a couple hardware updates, and they're good to go for another couple years. And there are schools around there that complain they don't have the technology or the textbooks. The abandoned schools did. Why? Why were these not moved out in a timely manner once it was announced the school was closing? How difficult could it be to get their hands on those textbooks and ship them to the schools that needed them? All you needed was paperwork and proper communication, in addition to the time needed to get these books transferred. So abandoned schools might be storage places, sure. But where was the boarding up of the doors, the windows, the guaranteed security of these buildings? I could have just walked in myself and happened upon a textbook, happened upon a computer. Oh, let's see what little Johnny's grades were. Oh, they weren't that good. Let's punish his parents. Let's ruin their credit history. Hey, their social security number's right here, right out in the open. It's public domain. There is no boards covering up these doors and windows to keep the vagrants and everybody else from coming in. It's a library, if you will, of information that shouldn't be shared with anybody else. Detroit Public Schools continually do a disservice to the students it teaches. There's your 74% dropout rate. It's not just because of the drugs or the shootings or the other crimes. There's a lot of them that drop out because they see there's no hope. They look for guidance. They look for direction. They look around their environment. They want to see that they're safe in a building. They want to know that they're being taught with the best materials, the most up-to-date technology, to try to keep up with the suburban kids or kids from other districts statewide or countrywide. Do all 74% want to drop out? No. But some of them drop out because there's no hope. And part of that lack of hope comes due to this lack of security. The school district could be setting an example, prioritizing the education of kids, and it's not by just what you teach in the textbooks. It's by getting the textbooks. It's by providing the technology. The United States, for example, is already eons behind the Japanese in terms of math skills and computer skills. And Detroit schools lag the United States in those very important departments. If nothing else, they want to look up to their administration and say, this is a role model. These are role models that should be followed. But when you're crying for textbooks, and they're 5 miles away, getting ripped off because they had to make a quick move to close the school, and that was just chaining the doors, you can still look in. Does this make any sense? And where is the accountability of the Detroit Public Schools? They've had 9 months to document all this. There is no accountability. There is no leadership. There is no care. There is no concern. That's why there's no graduates.